I remember my first job straight out of college. It was in early 2000. I was in my 20s. It was at a publishing company in Midtown Manhattan. And on my first day of that job, I knew automatically I was going to start and end my career there. And I was right. Because in less than 6 months, I got fired. My boss at the time sat me down and he says, David, you're fired, you're fucking incompetent. He was pretty blunt about the business, but I was shocked and I was upset. But I was optimistic. Things will get better. And ironically, I was wrong. That's what happens when you're early 20s. My friends that I went to school with, that looked up to me, abandoned me because I wasn't working at the time. I did not have a job. Future employers did not give me the time or day, no matter how many resumes I sent to them, because I got fired from my first job. And to make matters worse, I was only there for less than 6 months. I was in a really dark place in my life, and I spiraled into depression. I would sleep all day in the house I grew up in the Bronx, and the only time I woke up was to watch Growing Pains. And one afternoon, I'm sitting in my family's living room, and a Cialis commercial came on. And I see this middle-aged white guy running down this white sandy beach with his wrinkle-free khakis and his button-down dress shirt from Brooks Brothers. And I started to cry. And it's because the guy was better than me. And my parents knew I had a problem. And they sat down with me, and they said, David, you got to understand it was not your fault why you got fired. Now you got to move on. You got to find something. You got to do something with your life. Not just sit around and cry during Cialis commercials. And the next day, I found a job. It was on a construction site in New Jersey. A far cry from being in Midtown, where you're near Radio City Music Hall, you're near Rockefeller Center, and great restaurants. Now, I'm around gasoline stations and strip clubs. And I'm working in this stuffy and hot storage locker, unboxing computers. I feel like I'm in John Wayne Gacy's basement for minimum wage. It was humbling and degrading when your manager is John. And he was this like gruff and stocky middle-aged guy from Long Island. He cursed like a sailor, he always smoked cigars, and he walked around with this wooden baseball bat. And he had this tattoo on his arm. It was Donald Duck holding a decapitated head. It was not just childish, it was disturbing. And I did whatever I can to avoid any communication with him. So one morning when I walked on to that construction site, someone broke into the storage locker and stole all the computers. My body just felt completely numb, and my stomach just fell to the ground. When I turned around, John was standing behind me. He was holding up a wooden baseball bat. His face was beet red, and I could see the anger in his eyes. And he said, "What the fuck just happened? You don't lock the storage locker when you go home? What am I paying you for? Are you fucking incompetent?" Those words just brought anger through my veins because it brought back that bad memory of my first job when I sat down with my manager and he fired me. And I just stormed off that construction site. I was so pissed off, I couldn't think. When I got back home that night to the Bronx, standing in the front of the door was my mom. And she says, "David, what happened at work?" And I said, "What do you mean?" with an attitude. And she said, "John is looking for you." And that's when I felt like I shitted my pants. And she says, "John wants you to come back to work. He is worried. Why would you do something to a guy like John?" he sounded like such an angel. I'm like, Mom, you haven't met a man like John. You can't make assumptions. And he just said, regardless, I want you to go back if you need a job. Next morning, I swallowed my pride, and I went back to that construction site. And everyone on that site was egging me on. It was like back in high school. Ooh, John is pissed. John is going to beat the shit out of you without wooden baseball bat. And you're going to end up being a paraplegic in heaven. And I'm like, well, I don't have health insurance, and being paraplegic in heaven? Come on now. And I walked into his office, and he sat me down. And he gave me this look of death. And he says, David, I don't mind you have to go home early, but you gotta let me know. Now get back to fucking work. What am I paying you for? And when I walked back to that hot storage locker, I felt like I had a newfound respect for John. But when I started to unbox those computers, I knew my life sucked. And I walked back to his office, and I was like, John, I'm better than minimum wage. I have a college degree from Stony Brook, for Christ's sake. John looked at me with this confused look on his face. And he says, David, how come you never told me how you felt? Tell me what you really want to do in life. I said, John, I want to do something with my degree. I want to work with computers. And he said, okay, can you tell me why my computer monitor doesn't work? And he takes his wooden baseball bat and cracks his computer monitor. And I see like shrapnel of glass and plastic flying everywhere. And he points that baseball bat at me. And he said, you're lucky it's not your head, bitch. I'm gonna go fucking fix my monitor. And when I walked back to that storage locker, and I picked up one of those monitors, it weighed like a ton. This is before flat screens. In the back of my mind, I was like, wow, I think my career is going in the right direction. And every morning, I walked on to that construction site, he would break his monitor, and I would have to replace it all the time. My body is sore, and I'm tired of being a bitch. And the next time he broke his monitor, I actually plugged it into the wall outlet, and it worked. And John was impressed. And he got me doing spreadsheets. And after 1 year of working with John, he brought me back into his office. And he says, Dave, you're fired. It's not because you're incompetent, you're better than minimum wage. And plus, this project is over. I really enjoyed working with you, Dave. And I wish you the best of luck. After that conversation I had with John, it felt sad because I actually became close with him. And what I did was I walked into Dick's Sporting Good and I bought a wooden baseball bat. Because the one he had was all chipped from breaking too many monitors. And I got his initials engraved on it. And I marched back to his office and I pointed the baseball bat at him. I said, well, you're lucky it's not your head, bitch. We smiled and hugged. And today, I work in a thought leadership role. And every day I walk into my office and I stare outside the window. I see that building across the street where that publishing company was. My first job I got fired from. And I encourage senior executives every day to use empathy at work. Not break their computer monitors with baseball bats. And who would know a sociopath like John would make me the success I am today and not make impulsive decisions to get a tattoo of Donald Duck holding a decapitated head.